All right, welcome everyone. This is the Suck Less at Life podcast. I got Kevin Jones. He is one of the co-founders, is that correct? Of Day Trading University.
Yep, Day Trade University.
Day Trade University.
That's right.
Okay, thanks for that correction.
No problem.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the podcast, and I'm super grateful that you were allowing me to come here and to do this podcast with you. So I guess for starters, let's talk about you. Who are you? A little bit about your history, how you got here, where you are, and yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know really where to start other than the fact that I was born and raised here in Utah. I was born and raised in Payson. Lived up in Centerville for a minute just because my parents got divorced, and so I was between a couple of different homes. And grew up with an entrepreneurial father. He was always doing different businesses and teaching me in the process. I didn't play a lot of sports or anything because of who he was.
Interesting.
I actually did. I just worked with him. Like most of my memories growing up are working, not really like sports based or things like that. Where a lot of entrepreneurs and people, business owners, they get a lot of structure from sports in their younger years. That isn't something that came to me. Mine came from just being involved in businesses even at a very young age. So, and then I did a mission for the LDS Church for a couple of years. Did a 4-year degree both before and after that from Utah Valley University in business management, which I don't know that I learned too much there that I didn't already know because raised again by an entrepreneurial father.
Yeah.
And then, I came home from that mission. While I was in school, I did a summer of summer sales down in Austin, Texas, doing Dish Network and DirecTV.
Okay.
Also, like a super valuable experience for me, just because it requires structure and discipline and all the things that you really want to develop as a business owner, but you can't. It's hard to find good training grounds for that, and that's actually a really good place for it.
How long did you do the summer sales?
So I did like a month of training before I left, meaning like I would go knock doors here and there with guys that knew what they were doing more than me.
Yeah.
And then the other really interesting thing about it was I recruited about 15 of the 25 guys that were going to go to the office that I was going to, even though I'd never done it before. I just am persuasive, I guess, enough. So I ended up getting like an assistant manager position, even though I'd never done it before.
Right.
And worked out really well. So was able to learn a lot of good leadership skills and had some good mentors in that, teaching me through that. And so I just did it for that one summer. Came home with full intentions to go again and manage an office, and I had a friend come to me with the opportunity to open a cell phone store, a retail cell phone store, just as an authorized retailer for T-Mobile.
Okay.
So I'm 23 years old, get the opportunity to open a store, retail T-Mobile store, and I did that in Riverton, Utah. So partnered with him and did that, and then first month out of there, we netted profit $30,000. And as a 23-year-old, I just really thought I had made it. I had learned everything I needed to learn, and I was just going to go crazy. So I bought 7 more stores in Nevada and California.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
At 23?
Yeah.
Wow.
So and that went really good for a minute, and then it taught me a lot of good lessons about biting off more than you can chew. Because I went through some challenges with that, and that was also like it. Toward the end of that was 2007 and 2008. So I ended up learning a lot about business in the sense of like how economic factors can come into that, how I learned what it's like to be reliant on a business larger than you. So like I was an authorized retailer for T-Mobile, and I ended up picking up contracts also with Verizon and Sprint, but I did not have an authorized retailer contract with AT&T. And the iPhone came out in 2007 with an exclusive 3-year contract with AT&T. And so I would be sitting at my kiosk in Las Vegas, Meadows Mall in Las Vegas, a 12 by 12 kiosk that cost me $12,000 a month in rent.
Is that how much those cost?
Back then, they're probably much worse now.
Yeah.
It would depend on what you did though. Like if they thought your business made good money, they would charge you more for the same space.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. The guy next to me, and selling Tupperware or whatever, he might pay $2,000 a month for the same space. It's really kind of a weird deal.
Yeah, that is weird.
But I would look down the hall at AT&T, and they'd have a line 100 people long out the door waiting for the first iPhone that had just come out. And I'd have 2 or 3 people at my kiosk, and I kind of just saw the writing on the wall, so I immediately made that transition of getting out of that space. So a lot of good lessons learned there. All said and done, didn't work out as good as I wanted to, but it was again a launching pad for what was next for me. I had traded ever since I was 17. So while I was in high school, my dad started teaching me to trade. So like all through college, I traded while I did summer sales. I would sit in my cell phone stores waiting for customers, and I would trade through all of that. And so once the cell phone store thing wasn't a thing anymore, I was like sitting there with my current business partner and thinking like, what are we going to do next? And he had done a couple of the stores with me. And I had offered to teach him to trade while we were doing the cell phone stores. And he was like, no, I don't want to learn that. I'm focused on this.
Yeah.
But now that we were no longer focused on that, he was like, why don't you teach me to trade? And within probably less than a week, he's like, this is our next business. We need to teach people how to do this. Because particularly in 2008, one of the big challenges was the housing market was starting to pop, right? And people were getting hammered in their traditional investments. And so not only did we have a cool product with the software that we have developed, right? Not only do we have the opportunity to teach people what they actually need to know about day trading versus all the information that's out there. There's so much information about it. But we had an environment in which people needed to know how to use it, because most people don't know how to make money in a down market. Right. And that's what they were dealing with in 2008. They were dealing with a down market. Like we would hear this every day. My 401k is a 201k. That's what people would say to us. And it was really important to us that we started teaching people how to make money in a down market. Mm-hmm. Now, since then, obviously, there's been a lot of really good years. And the great thing for our product is that it's good up or down. So even during the last 10 years where things have looked really good for the U.S. economy, it's been really fun to help people grow their money in a fun and fast way. But then you get to right now, the last year or so, when things are starting to taper off, crypto's not exciting anymore for people. Starting to change, the economics of everything is changing with rates going up, credit's not as available. There's so many different variables where learning to make money in a down market is, again, a crucial step for people if they want to protect themselves when they feel out of control.
Yeah. So do you find that during market conditions where, like right now, where there's a lot of uncertainty, or if it's going down, do you find that tends to drive more business toward people wanting to learn how to day trade?
Absolutely. So what we end up with is more possible clients, but we also find, similar to a lot of sales businesses right now, that you have to know what you're doing. Like you have to know. I think in 2020, money and credit was just so readily accessible that people, sales guys became more order takers than they did an actual sales guy, right? Like being able to create a relationship of trust with somebody and show them that your product is worthwhile and help them see a future in which your product helps them, right? Like a lot of guys didn't actually learn how to do that. They just became really good order takers because people were just knocking on the door asking to spend money. And that's not the case anymore, at least what I've seen. So we get a lot more customers coming through the door, but they're doing a lot harder deep dive into our product and what it's going to look like for them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So I'm actually enrolled in the program, and it took me 3 months to officially jump in. So I guess that kind of resonates with me a little bit, where people are more taking more time to look at, rather than, like you said, people coming in and just saying, I want this product, and people being order takers. And I resonate with that too, because I'm in the car industry selling cars, and 2020, 2021, you couldn't find any cars anywhere, and so people would just come and say, I need a car, and just kind of had to get the car that was available, and that's kind of how it was. And now that cars are a little bit more available, the salespeople that kind of started during 2020, 2021 are just now realizing that there's more to just sales than taking orders. They have to foster a relationship and actually understand the needs of the customer.
That's right.
Rather than just saying, okay, yeah, I'll sell you that car.
Yeah. Whether it's really what you want or not, it's what's available, right?
Right.
Now it's like very much more like, hey, I get to see that this is going to serve me in some way. This is the thing I actually really want. That's what you have to get out of your customer in order to get a yes.
Well, I think there's a lot more competition too, which generally is great for the markets. Have you seen more competition? I don't know how many businesses there are like this one where they have proprietary indicators and coaching, but how much influence has there been from your competition and forcing you guys to step up more, or how do you deal with that if that's been a thing?
Yeah. One thing that we really have to our advantage is our software. Our indicators are the best in the world, according to my opinion, right? And I've spent a lot of years going to what's called like money shows, or I think that's mostly what they're termed as. They have slightly different names depending on where they're doing it, but money show. Mm-hmm. And so they host those in the big markets. Most of the time I've gone to them in Vegas, but I've been to one in Chicago and different places. And what they're talking about is what are the best ways to trade, right? So I'll go there and I'll always put our stuff up against anything that I can find there, anything that's new and hot and sexy, and I always find that ours have better timeliness and accuracy in their signals that they're getting. So that's really one thing that's a huge advantage to us. The second big advantage for us is we've focused on creating a community of traders. So a lot of our customers know each other, okay? We put them in webinars together. We do a lot of group coaching on top of the one-on-one coaching that somebody gets when they first get started. Mm-hmm. So what that does is it fosters an environment of learning, an environment of understanding what it takes to be a successful trader, and not just being on a desert island by yourself trying to learn this new skill. You can say, like, you can go out to our chat rooms and be like, hey, I'm struggling with this right now, and you'll have 10 guys that say, yeah, I had the same challenge, and here's what I did about it. We have incredible mentors, what I call mentors. We have incredible coaches that teach people to trade. It's one of the big facets of our organization is the ability to get a one-on-one mentor, somebody who is a trader and knows what they're doing, and they are helping you speed up the velocity at which you learn to trade. You could go learn to trade on your own out on the web.
I've tried that.
Yeah, it just takes forever, and you don't know what you're looking for. You don't know if it's the right things. So I've said this before, but there's all this information out on the web about trading, and what you really need is this much information. Mm-hmm. You need enough information to make you dangerous and really lock in on a strategy that works for you. A bread and butter strategy. And then you can go and say, I want to learn about this market now and this market now, and I want to trade this product and this product. But you can learn all that while you're making money here. Yeah. And that's one of the big focus that we have as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to the top of that mountain, and it seems like you just gotta stick on one trail versus like starting on one, going to the other, and all that.
Yeah.
At least in my experience, I watched a ton of YouTube videos, support, resistance, MACD, RSI, all this stuff, and there's just so much information that you try to combine everything together, and you can't come up with a coherent, consistent strategy. I want to take a step back for a second. So you mentioned you started trading when you were 17 and you were taught by your dad.
Yep.
So when did these indicators the proprietary indicators become a thing? Did your dad create those? Did you create those, or how long have those been around?
Yeah, it was my dad. I was probably 15 when he started working on them. He went to a day trading seminar when E-minis were introduced, E-mini S&Ps. They were introduced electronically in the late 90s. So people could get on the internet and trade, right? It was still nothing like today, meaning that you jumped on there and you still had to have your broker's phone number on speed dial, because half the time your internet was working and half the time it wasn't.
Yeah.
You didn't know if you were getting good data or not, and it was a lot more sloppy back then. But they were introduced, so electronic trading of mini S&P contracts was introduced. That's what I started learning on. He went to an event to learn it, and they gave him some of these free indicators that you just mentioned, like RSIs and MACDs and those.
Yeah.
And he went out the first week, opened a $10,000 account. The first day he lost $6,000. So, and this is the late 90s, so money was a little more, that 10,000 was a little more painful then. But come to find out, it was one of the biggest reasons he had lost was he was trading the wrong symbol. And so he came out of that with the knowledge of two things. He needed better education and he needed better tools. And my dad was very talented mathematically, and so he just went to work on that. He started using what he could find from his knowledge of algorithms and things to be able to find strategies that would work. The really cool thing about these is how they're built. They actually adjust over time to current data coming in from the market, where a lot of strategies aren't that way. A lot of strategies in the market where somebody says, I have an EA, right? You've heard that term, EA, expert advisor.
Okay.
So it's like an auto trader that somebody builds, and they build it off history of what's happened in the market in the past. But it's static. It doesn't adjust to current changing market conditions. So what happens is it'll work for a while, but then you've got this market out there, this market that's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of banks and traders like us and organizations and things that are putting money into and out of the market every single day. And that ecosystem eventually picks up on these robots, if you will, that are just sticking to one strategy, and it corrects to them. And so they quit working. With our indicators, I've been trading the same indicators since I started. So I was 15 when he started putting them together. About 17 is when I started using them, and I was probably one of the first 10 or 20 people that used them. And for 8 years after that, we just used them, he and I and close friends and family. We would just get together and trade and work on stuff. And it was, like I said, it wasn't until that 2008 where we decided we wanted to take them to market with everybody. So
okay, how did that transition look when you decided to turn the indicators and the coaching and all that into a business?
Yeah, so I mentioned that my one of my business partners on the cell phone stores decided that he thought it was a good idea, and that was where we could go next with. Because we both had an entrepreneurial spirit. We wanted to build businesses. Yeah. And we wanted to solve problems, And in 2008, that was the problem, was the markets were hammering people, and we had a solution. So that was kind of the kickoff point for it. And then I think that what it really came down to for us was being able to having something that people needed and how to get it in their hands. And we went through many different iterations of that. So the first problem that we ran into was, at the time, the algorithms would have just had to have been downloaded to your computer, and you would have had complete view of what those algorithms look like. They were not
so proprietary.
They were not proprietary at all at that point. Meaning, I could have just given them to you, and you could have given them to the world. They weren't encrypted in any way. So that was the first step, was being able to do that. But what was really funny is we thought we could get it done quicker than we could. Mm-hmm. And you'll usually find that when you get anything developed or done or coded or anything like that, they'll typically give you a timeline. And I've always said, take that timeline and double it. So we were selling customers before we had a product to give them. We had this product over here, but it wasn't ready to deliver. Yeah. Right? And so we had about 50 plus customers ready on a subscription basis to start using our product. And we weren't doing a cheap product. I think it was, $280 a month or something like that. And they were ready to go. They had already paid their first month's membership, and we did not have a product to give them yet because we were behind on how long it took us to get there.
Yeah.
A lesson in that for people who are looking at starting a business or thinking about jumping into something is like, you punch a hole in the wall, now you're motivated to patch that hole. If you're going to start a business, just start. Just go. And you'll learn your lessons, and some of them will suck and it'll get hard at times. But you'll be able to, what you'll find is that even if you get knocked down, you'll get back up and you'll have those lessons of what's next. So for us, it was we had some of those people we had to refund, and we had pissed off people, and we had to give free months away and things like that. But what did it do? It motivated us to get the job done and get that minimum viable product out to people. So that was the kind of the transition. We started teaching people out of a 3-ring binder that we would ship to them, and then videos. And then we had a minute there where DVDs got delivered, like Tony Robbins style. And then luckily, probably 2012-ish, you got into better screen sharing technology. You could start to use, products where you could do webinars and things like that. And that really opened an opportunity for us to expand our business out of just a localized market.
Yeah. What's interesting about these indicators is that there's a lot of freedom to kind of look at them how you want. There's not one way you're supposed to look at them. Yeah. And so I'm assuming that's the reason why you don't run into the problem where you get with trading bots, where the market kind of picks up on that and they stop working. Is that accurate, I guess? Is that's kind of why these work consistently as market conditions change?
There's really 2 reasons that it continues to work. Number one is that the way those algorithms are written, they have data points that are constantly being updated by current market data. They're not only looking at history, they're looking at current market data. And then when that algorithm has a solution, it's creating the variable for the next algorithm. And so the current market data is actually what's keeping that algorithm alive, if that makes sense, versus just looking at historical stuff. So that's reason number one. Reason number 2, and it's also the back end of our program, is that anybody who graduates from one of our coaching programs gets a funded account from us. We fund the account and then we split the profits with them. And the reason that works well for us is that we have thousands of trading accounts out there with our name on them, but the other people are trading for us. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what's happening is that you're trading the euro, I'm trading the Japanese yen, somebody else is trading the British pound, someone else is on the Swiss franc, right? And we've got all these things that are running at different times, and we're trading at different times of day, and we're taking different lot sizes, and all of these different variables. So what happens if you were to look at it is that all these accounts are constantly going up and down in different pieces of the market. So the market is not honing in on one strategy that is highly leveraged and able to take advantage of it, because there is no one strategy that's highly leveraged.
Okay.
So another thing that you brought up as well, another variable in all that, is that last piece of you might be using XYZ strategy of my indicators, and I might be using a slightly different version. Yeah. And so we're taking slightly different trades. And so there's never one strategy that's being highly leveraged. Now, where you get an EA, where that problem comes in, is that somebody finds a strategy. They find an arbitrage strategy, or they find some strategy that they want to pump it up all the way to its maximum capability. And so they jam tons and tons of money into that. And what happens is that's when it gets picked up, because it's a single strategy highly leveraged.
Yeah.
So
okay. Well, I think I kind of want to shift a little more into, I guess, core attributes and thoughts and ideas, values that you developed over time that has helped you become, I guess, successful and I guess I'll start by asking what would be some core values that you as an individual have that has been instrumental in helping you grow as a person and your business.
Okay. So I got this question from somebody else a couple weeks ago. The way they labeled it is, what's your superpower? And I thought, I don't know that I actually have any of those. I don't know that I have a single one. But as I thought more about it and as I wanted to really answer the question, it came to two things for me. And one of which I've kind of already mentioned, and that is I'm willing to take risks that other people aren't. That's one of the things. I'm willing to go out and challenge myself and start something that I'm not really quite ready to start. And I think that's something that a lot of business owners would say, is that they would say, like, I kind of started before I was ready. And then you've got all these people out there with really great ideas, and they're so busy putting the model together that they never actually make a sale. They never put their product to market because there's a piece missing. There's something that's not quite right about it. And so they never put their product to market, and they never get off their feet, right? Or they never get off the ground. Mm-hmm. So I'm willing to say, like, hey, I've got a minimum viable product. I understand that it's going to be better in 2 weeks, but I'm still going to sell it today. Mm-hmm. And if what it takes for me to make that customer happy is that I give them the iteration 2 weeks from now for free, that's what I'll do, right? But I'm going to start today. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of my superpowers, is the ability to just jump into something even though I'm not fully comfortable with it yet. I think the second thing that has helped me over the years is just I give up a little bit slower than other people do. Probably not a lot. Like, I'm not some David Goggins, or something like that, where I'll run 150 miles and just out of sheer will, Yeah. I'm not that guy. But like if we're competitive, I'm going to give up a tiny bit slower than most other people. And just that little bit extra has made the difference for me so many times. That time where you say to yourself, like, I'm ready to give up, and then you go, I'll go one more day. I'm just gonna go one more day. Or you've got an invoice from a marketing agency that isn't quite working out, and you're like, you know what, I don't want to pay that invoice again. I'm gonna do it one more time. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna try one more month with these guys. I'm gonna see if I can make it work. Or you've got a sales guy who hasn't quite come over the hump, right? And he's in your organization, and he's costing you money, and he's costing you time, and he's costing you leads, and you're about to pull the plug on him. Maybe give him one more try, And just that kind of, like, do it one more time, give it one more rep, give it one more day, give it one more month. That kind of lack of willingness to give up has really served me.
Awesome. Kind of going back to your first point, it sounds like just the watered down version is you're not very risk averse, I guess. You're okay with taking risks, and it's funny. I think with a lot of things, if you're waiting to do something because you're comfortable with it, you're not going to do very much. At least something that's going to really help you grow.
Right. Yeah. Comfort's not a good place to be. Comfort's
not for very long, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. You could feel it for a moment, but then you really need to find what's next to make yourself uncomfortable if you want to keep improving. And there's so many analogies for this, right? Like, just fitness is a super easy one. Golf's a great one, right? Like, you have to find that thing that the minute you feel comfort, go, okay, what do I get to do to push past this? And I know that sounds weird, because a lot of times we want to push past discomfort. But if you can train your mind to look at comfort as a place you only want to be temporarily, you'll actually find that you continue to grow at a rate that really will make you happy.
It's interesting. I've had conversations with people just based off of experience I've had in the past. It's like, if you're going to wait for happiness, you'll never be happy. I'll be happy when I have a relationship. I'll be happy when I am married. I'll be happy when I have a house. I'll be happy when I have money. I'll be happy when I'm retired. If you're going to wait to be happy, you're never going to be happy. So yeah. I think that's a principle that I really resonate with is, don't wait for comfort to to make the leap.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would say about that is to take something that you've achieved. Okay, so think back on a time in your life when that was a thing you were saying, like, if I could make 100 grand, I'd be happy, right? Like it's an early one for a lot of people, right? A 20-year-old says, if I can make 100 grand, I'll be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And then remember, when you got to that 100 grand, were you happy? And most people will say, well, no. And a better question that I ask is, were you happy? Probably not, just with that, because you wanted to keep going now. But were you any happier when you made 100 grand than you were when you made 50? And when people can make that comparison, they go, I'm actually no happier with 100 grand than I was 50. And I've found that it's the same with $1 million, 10 million. Like there's numbers there that make things simpler and easier, right? Like the same things don't stress me out that used to.
Right.
And I was having this conversation with a friend the other day about, like, I can remember, like, if I needed to buy a new set of tires for my car, that was very stressful for me. I can remember that feeling,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like $800 for tires or whatever. And now that's not even doesn't even hit the radar, right? So it makes some things simpler to have money, but I'm literally 0% happier. And I don't know if that is because of who I am or what, but I just find that happiness is driven by the things that are a little bit more important than, not a little bit, a lot more important than your money, you know?
What would you say some of those things are?
Oh, your relationships. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you had mentioned earlier whether or not you were okay if you got into spirituality, and I don't have any problem with that. But like, if you believe that anything goes on beyond this life, like the minute you believe something goes on beyond this life, the less important money becomes to you, because you're just like, well, I am certain that my money doesn't go with me,
right?
Because it stays here. Everyone I've ever seen leave this life, their money stayed here. So I am certain that my money doesn't go with me. So what could go with me? Potentially personal relationships is one that could go with me. The love that I have and create in this life is something that I believe can go with me. And those are the things that I find have the greatest value, because they are something that I consider eternal versus just for this life, you know?
Right. So let's move on to, I guess, kind of general advice, I guess, for people. What would you say are some habits that you've developed that have been instrumental for your progress?
Yeah.
I feel routines, I guess.
Sure. I think a lot of them are probably ones you hear on podcasts like this all the time. And I don't want to be redundant, but I would just add my voice to those. Mm-hmm. And one that really crosses my mind and is huge for me for my whole life is the amount of quality mentors that I've had. I've been blessed with really good mentors in many different aspects of my life, and now I pay for them, right? I pay for coaches to help teach me and mentor me. Mm-hmm. I didn't always have that, and you don't have to do that. You can find exceptional mentors who are willing to do it at no cost, just because they're at a point in their life where they want to give back, right? And a simple request of like, hey, can I shadow you for a couple weeks is like, they're like, yeah, I can do that. I'm great with that. And you can gain immeasurable knowledge from somebody like that for zero cost. So mentors are huge. Structure. I have always been a big believer in having good structure. And I think that that's proven all the way from childhood up into adulthood. The people who have routine, people who have structure, people who can stick to a plan and develop discipline around that structure and that plan, I think they perform at levels that people who can't stick to a plan can't perform at those levels. You know, when you're all over the place and you're disorganized, you're not going to perform at the same level as somebody who has really good structure. Mm-hmm. So,
would you say structure could be pretty synonymous with discipline in general, or would you say that there's kind of distinctions between structure and discipline?
Yeah, discipline. You know, you hear a lot about what the definition of discipline is, and I think the great one I think it was a Mike Tyson that said it. He said, doing the things you don't want to do like you love doing them, or something like that every day, And I think that's what discipline is. Discipline is doing something you don't want to do, even though you don't want to do it. You still go do it. And so structure is not necessarily the same, but keeping your structure will require discipline. Like, you'll have to have that. There will be times in which your structure is not fun. It's not comfortable. It's not sexy. And it is that thing that you just, like, you're laying in bed and you're thinking, like, I don't want to do that today. And sometimes there's not somebody there to cheer you on to go do it. And so you just have to make the decision in your mind that you're your only cheerleader, and you're not going to cheer for yourself. You're just going to keep your word. And I think that that's another piece of this that really comes into it. And it actually comes off of that theory of I am willing to take risks, and I am willing to, like I said, give somebody a first version of my product, knowing that I might have to give them a third version for free because they're going to see how much it improved to keep them happy. But I'll jump into that because I'm interested in growing the business, but I also will have enough integrity to make sure that they're happy as a customer, right? And so for me, that is a part of discipline as well, is like keeping your word to yourself and to others, which I call integrity. So part of discipline is keeping your word. So when you say you're going to do something and you're laying in bed and you don't want to do it, well, guess what? You already said you would, so get up and do it.
Yeah, I think the hardest part about being accountable or having integrity is having integrity with yourself and accountability with yourself, because it's a lot easier to, tell yourself, I'm going to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be super productive, and then the alarm goes off, and then you say, well, if I don't do that, no one's going to be mad at me for that, as opposed to if you make a promise to someone else, it's easier for that person to help you stay accountable. And I think going back to discipline, motivation is great, but everyone's motivated when they start something, but motivation is very fleeting. I don't think motivation is worth a whole lot, because it's probably not going to be around for too long. It's the discipline that helps you stick to your structure, like you said.
Yeah, there's no question that discipline is the greater driving force than motivation. I do still think motivation plays a part, and there are techniques you can use to have more motivation and gain motivation. One that's worked really well for me is like to focus on the small wins rather than the large wins, right? So like literally take it down to like, that meeting went really well, or I just got my 10th sale. And like those little tiny wins that they're obviously painting a larger picture. Those little wins will paint a larger picture. But if you're out here looking at this larger picture only and you can't focus on a small win, motivation will be zero.
Right.
So
I did a podcast with Blake Murdoch, who's my boss right now. But kind of an idea that he's instilled in his business and instills into his employees is you have to have a strong enough why to get you through the things that aren't as fun. And a why, I guess, is just a fancy version of a goal, but just a stronger version, I guess. So some has a little bit more meaning. Versus, my goal might be I want to make $100,000 this year, or have $1 million, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But why do you want that?
Yeah. I would add one thing to that, and I would say not only have a why, but share it. Tell people about it.
Which helps with accountability.
Have a why that you're okay being vulnerable about, right? Like where you could literally put your face and your why on a billboard and not be like what's the word, like concerned that someone's going to find out about what really matters to you, because then it's like it becomes your purpose, and people can connect with you in a way that they can't otherwise, because they understand you at a deeper level than just like, hey, I want to be rich, right? That's not a real good why.
Everyone wants to be rich.
Yeah. Consciously, subconsciously, a lot of people are worried about it. Anyway.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic on money mindset. But yeah, if you want to go back to advice for others, it's fix your money mindset. That's a huge one for me. But yeah, I think that it's important that you can be vulnerable and share that why, and then people will connect with you, and you'll gain customers easier. You'll network easier. You'll find good business connections easier, just because you can be genuine in that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's another aspect to sharing your why or your goals with other people, is just more people to help you, stay accountable.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something that really matters. There's a difference between calling your friend and saying, hey, I'm going to wake up at 6:30 tomorrow, and he's like, okay.
Yeah.
Versus, this is what I want to do with my life. And just having people keep you accountable to that,
Yeah. I think about some of these memes that I've seen that are really funny about, like, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's like a guy's at the urinal peeing, right? And there's like 10 or 12 urinals. But then the guy walks in and goes right to the urinal next to him, and he says, hey, I'm a vegan. Or he says, hey, I do CrossFit,
Yeah.
And all that is, it's funny because it's real, right? That people want to talk about what they're up to. But the reason they want to talk about what they're up to is they're literally putting that out there in the universe. And if you're built like me, if I tell enough people that I'm going to do something, I feel really obligated to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so you tell your best friend that you're going to wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and he's just like, whatever, dude, I don't care.
Okay, have fun with that. I'll sleep in.
But if you're telling 100 people at a conference, you're speaking at a conference, and you tell 100 people, like, I'm getting up at 6:30 tomorrow, you feel a lot more motivated to get up at 6:30 because you gave your word that you would.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and if you can take that integrity level down to where you just tell one person and you keep your word, that's even better. And there's even a level deeper than that, and that is, I told myself I would get up at 6:30, and I keep my word to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think that's where you really hit your stride around personal growth, is when I can share my goals out there, but the only person I have to share my word with is me, and it still gets done.
That's something to strive for, it sounds like. Do you know who Eddie Hall is?
I don't.
Are you familiar with the sport of strongman at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So Eddie Hall, he won World's Strongest Man in 2017. And kind of the following years up to that, it was Brian Shaw, it was Thor, it was, well, mostly Brian Shaw.
Okay.
And I'm assuming you know who he is, maybe.
Yeah. Now that you put him in context, I can't like picture his face, but I think I maybe watched a documentary on him.
The strongest man in history. He's on the History Channel. Anyway.
Yeah, I think I've seen that maybe.
Anyway, so strongman is something that I'm really into. I compete, and I actually just last night drove back from Colorado to a show that Brian Shaw was hosting, and it was really a big deal. But anyway, so Eddie Hall, he won World's Strongest Man in 2017, which is the biggest title in strongman right now. And up until that point, he was basically telling everyone, I'm going to win World's Strongest Man. Just, I can't remember how long before, but probably a few years, and he's just dead set on telling everyone, telling the world.
Yeah.
And he's a pretty prominent figure, so everyone knew that he said, I'm going to win, and he put in the work, and he freaking won. And then after that, he said, I'm going to break the world's record deadlift, which is 500 kilograms, which is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the world record deadlift contest, and he freaking broke that record by I think it was 30 kilograms, which is that's like 70 pounds or something,
Yeah.
which is a massive amount to break
Right.
a world record on the deadlift.
Yep.
But yeah, I just kind of thought about that, and just putting that out into the universe, and basically everyone that was involved in strongman or follows it all was holding him accountable to that.
Yeah, making yourself accountable to others, and then having that feeling. Again, this is just part of my story, is like that feeling when somebody says, like, if you had said to them, and people probably did this to him when he said, "I'm going to win World Strongman competition," I bet there was a good chunk of those people who went, "No, you're not."
Oh yeah.
And that for certain people can be just fuel on the fire, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it is for me. Like I always say, like, if I really want to do something, I need to find somebody who tells me I can't.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's interesting too. I think arguably having that deadlift world record was probably a bigger deal than winning World's Strongest Man. Maybe,
yeah.
just in the sense because, you know, the previous record I think was like 470 kilograms or something like that, and 500 kilograms just seemed like a level that was just absolutely impossible. Like, kind of, I don't know, what was it, sub 4 minute mile?
Yep.
Before that was broken, it just seemed like, you know, there was a ceiling that it was impossible to
That's right.
to achieve, and so yeah, it was just very ambitious.
So if it's anything like the sub 4 minute mile, he better watch out, because people will come for him now.
Well,
They're gonna
and
come for that record.
yeah, and that's the thing. And there's anyone watching this knows anything about strongman. There's a lot of beef between him and another strongman, and that other strongman actually beat the world record by, I think it was just 1 kilogram, and it wasn't in like an official strongman competition. There's a lot of controversy, but anyway, he did beat it. He lifted 501 kilograms.
Yeah.
But yeah, just kind of an interesting
sure.
thing
Yeah.
that I thought a lot or that I thought about, I guess.
Yeah. No, it's one of those analogies that you can carry into other things. You know, you talk about, like I said, you talk about golf, or you talk about all these other things. Like, I'm sure that as much as weightlifting or strongman is probably a good portion physical, I think everybody doesn't understand how much of a mental game it would be as well, right? And that's the same for trading. It's the same for golf. It's the same for most of life. Just as much as you get to get your body in shape, or you get to get your mind in shape, like you get to get your emotions in shape. There's a lot of different things that go into you making things work at a high level.
Right. Well, and I think if your goal or what you want in life is easy to get, then it's probably not a very, probably not a very good goal. I mean, the things worth having in life aren't cheap experiences, and you know, there's a lot of work and dedication that you have to put into that to, you know, get the things that you want. You know, things don't come easy.
That's right. Yeah, and I think the way I usually look at that is anything worthwhile is generally not easy.
Right.
Right. And so if you're finding that something is difficult for you to come by, or it seems super far out of reach, or it's like, this is going to take me years, or I'm going to have to commit hardcore to this, like, when those things go through your mind, you can follow that statement with, wow, this is probably worth it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there was something that Blake said in our podcast about sacrificing. How was it put? But basically, the things that you sacrifice is worth sacrificing because the reward is greater than the sacrifice. But the initial part is hard because no one wants to do no one wants to sacrifice.
Yeah.
Especially when the results aren't immediate. You know, everyone wants that instant gratification.
Yep. Yeah. Sacrifice is tough. Mentally, one of the things that you can do around sacrifice is change the language on it. And so instead of calling it sacrifice, you call it investment, or you call it it's what I'm paying for what I want.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about, Alex Hormozi talks about if you wanted to make a really great human, would you make things easy on them? And you wouldn't. If you wanted to teach them patience, would you just give them everything they wanted whenever they wanted it? No. You'd make them wait. You'd make them struggle. You'd make them have challenges. And that would create a patient person. And so when we shift the language on that stuff, and instead of calling it sacrifice, we call it investment, or we call it the payment we're making to achieve X, sometimes it becomes more manageable mentally.
Sure. No, I guess it depends on, what it is that you have to sacrifice too.
Well, and it is fun to look back on things and say, I sacrificed that. But in the moment, that's when it's painful, But to look back and be like, oh man, I sacrificed that, and it feels good. In the moment is when it's painful.
Well, and sacrificing things in the moment can be looked at as a big risk too, because what if whatever you're sacrificing, whatever you stop doing, what if whatever you're working toward doesn't pan out? And I think that goes back to one of your superpowers about you're willing to take risks. You're willing to fail.
I think one of the reasons for that is that after my experience in the cell phone stores, I don't really look at things as failures as much. I look at them as lessons learned.
Right.
Again, that's just a language shift. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's still a failure, right? You still experience failure,
right,
in the eyes of the world. But when you shift the language around it and you go, man, I really learned a lot of great lessons. Another thing that has really helped me in that very vein is believing that everything that happens to me is somehow for me. Everything, right? And I've taken this down to getting a flat on the freeway. Like, if you go into that with the mentality of like, somehow this is for my good, you will always be happier in the moment of that struggle. Right. And so just to use that analogy, like I blew a tire on the freeway one time, and I had actually changed a tire on that car 3 weeks earlier. Right. And this, it's not a jalopy, it's a Range Rover, right? It shouldn't be getting flats every 3 weeks, but, blow a tire, hit a piece of concrete in the road, pull over, and in my mind I'm all upset, but then I thought, no, this is somehow for you. And I didn't know how it was, but for all I know, a mile up the road it just saved me from an accident. Who knows? And I might never know. But there's been many times in my life where I've had a really hard situation. I've said to myself, I know this is somehow for me, and I don't know why, but this is for me. So I got through it a little easier, and I've had times where it wasn't till 5 years later that I went back to that. Like, that's why I had that experience 5 years later. And so when you live in that space, it gets you through it momentarily, but it also can be a really good thing to keep you moving when you finally find out why you had that experience. Right.
Well, kind of going back to kind of religious, we share the same faith. I served a mission too. But I think for those who are watching that are religious, whether Christian or whatever faith, knowing that God is in control of everything, His hand is involved in every aspect of our life, whether it's coming down to do something or it's being stayed to let something happen. Whether it's He's letting us learn from a mistake that we're making that's going to help us in the future. But yeah, just having that realization that everything that happens is for a reason. Yeah. Getting you through the harder moments.
I try not to. For you and I, we would call it God. I like to give other people other ways to look at it. Right. Like you could call it the universe, you could call it Mother Nature, you could call it karma, whatever you want to call it. But just that belief that you live in a system that is for your good. Right. It's here to build you. And when you believe that, there's never an experience that isn't there to build you. I think it was Albert Einstein. He said, the most important decision we make is whether we live in a friendly or hostile universe. And as soon as you make that decision that you live in a friendly universe, like, you will find things get easier. I guess I don't love the word easier, simpler.
I was just going to say, I think the book, the The Road Less Traveled. I think the first paragraph basically talks about life is hard. As soon as you realize or accept the fact that life is hard, life becomes easier. Not because it is easier, just because you expect things to be hard and you're ready to deal with that. What was I going to say? So just having that mindset of like the world is a place that I'm here and I'm meant to grow because I'm here. Having that mindset, I think, is something that I've never really thought about before, in those terms at least. And I think for people who are very cynical and angry about how the world is, I think that would be like almost a cure for that.
Yeah.
You know, there's one of the things that really inspired me to start this podcast is I just saw so many people complaining about their situation and wanting the world to change. They're trying to do everything that they can to convince the world to change so that the world will be better for them, versus make themselves better and you know, bringing up their world around them and basically the bottom line is just take accountability for where you are and do the things that you need to do to pull yourself up and put yourself in a situation that you like.
Yeah, you can virtually flip that pain on its head when you say to yourself, this is for me, this is for my good, this is for my growth. Instead of looking at the world like, oh, why me, why me, why me? This is painful, I hate this, I'm struggling with this. If you can look at all those situations and go like, this is painful, that's teaching me something.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do to get out of pain, right? This is, you know, you have another situation. This is challenging. Do I like challenging? No. So what do I get to do about that, right? And so all of a sudden, instead of pain being the thing that you're focused on the solution.
Do you know that meme from the guy on the History Channel? I think it was Ancient Aliens or something, but the guy with crazy hair has got his hands up and the caption is, I'm not saying it's aliens, but aliens is the answer or whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of going back to the strongman thing, I saw a guy that had created his own shirt where it had Brian Shaw's face on it, where he put his face over that meme, and instead of aliens, he said adversity.
Oh yeah.
And just there's a lot that happened to him kind of leading up to, you know, his most recent shows, and I don't know, I like to talk about that a lot just because he's been someone that I've idolized as far as, you know, mindset and all this stuff.
Yeah, there's
just life advice, morals, everything.
So many good examples of that, and those are some of my favorites as well. Just like documentaries that showcase people who are that show off their ability to have an incredible amount of grit. You know, it's just, they are some of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Last question. If you could just with a snap of a finger instill one value into everyone in the world, what would that be?
So this answer is probably different in the last 6 months than I would have told you before.
I'd be interested in hearing what it would have been too.
Yeah, before I think I probably would have said what I would call 100% responsibility, where everybody understands that something might not be their fault, but they get to be responsible for it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the example I give of this is you pull out in traffic in a perfectly legal situation and somebody hits your car. It's not your fault, right? You even had the police show up and write a ticket to that person and give you a police report, and the insurance says it's not your fault, and everyone says it's not your fault. Simple fact of the matter is your car is still wrecked.
Mm-hmm.
You get to be responsible, right? You can either drive a wrecked car forever, or if it's not drivable, you can go without a car. Responsibility means I get to do something about what's in my life, right? And so that would have used to be my answer. And now I think if I could get people, if I could snap, it would be an increase in love just across the board. If people could have more love for themselves to start, and then let that trickle out to more love to those around them, and then let that trickle out to more love to strangers. And seeing everybody as valuable, seeing everybody as a human being just like yourself. Some people have more money, some people have more talent, some people have better bodies or worse bodies, or whatever rating system that you use to make yourself feel good about where your stature is in life. The simple fact of the matter is there is still a person out there in that other individual, and they have their own challenges and their own struggles, and if we could all just have more love, I think it would absolutely adjust the way that our world functions.
Yeah.
So
I think where we are today, more than any other time in history, I think people overall are the most disingenuous that we've ever been. And I think a big reason is because, social media, we can say something to someone clear across the world without any consequences.
Yep.
And I think that's rolled over, from social media to people in real life, and how we label people that we disagree with, especially in politics. And I think one of the biggest, I think the political realm would be 500 times better if people were not disingenuous with how they label people that they disagree with. It's easy to say, well, I don't know if I want to get into specific examples, but basically saying if you believe this, then you are this, is completely untrue.
Yeah,
and I think the people that say that, they know that it's not true, but it feels good to I guess stoke your ego or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's easy to want to go political on that, right? Mm-hmm. And what's so funny about that is that this is actually a part of that belief for me around the world being for my good, right? Or my experiences always being for me. I actually believe that 99+% of the population on the earth are good people. Even though we have like a 50-50 political ideology, at least that's what we're told, right? I think that you could take 100 people in a room and 99 of them are good people. And there's only 1% in my mind that are actually out there trying to do harm.
Right.
And I don't know, of course, I don't have anything statistically to prove that, but I'm just saying from a belief standpoint of my own, I think it helps me deal with people in a different way because I look at people with some level of love and trust that maybe other people who believe it's 50-50 would want to know more about you before I can actually decide if I can be your friend. Well,
and empathy too. This is actually something that me and Blake Murdoch talked about during that podcast. Is the majority of people have good intentions.
Yeah.
And again, it's disingenuous to assume that anyone that disagrees with you on anything is up to no good or wants the world to burn or whatever.
Well, if anything, you should want disagreement. Disagreement is where great ideas come from.
Well, it insert civil discourse, right?
Yeah. I think Ray Dalio, you know who he is?
I don't.
So he ran Hedgewater Capital. Bridgewater Capital. Anyway, one of the largest hedge funds for probably 40 years. And he said, he called it thoughtful disagreement. So where you're not attacking each other, but you're saying like, no, this is why I have this position. Mm-hmm. And you do it from a place of peace and kindness and understanding that person has a different opinion. But if we can be thoughtful about it, we can actually come closer to what we would call truth.
Yeah, the Socratic method.
Yeah.
There's actually one more question I wanted to ask, and kind of going back to trading.
Okay.
Pretty much anyone that you tell that you're a day trader or you're going to learn to day trade will tell you, oh, well, and 90% of traders lose money. Yeah. I have my theories as to why that is. I don't even know if that's an actual statistic.
Yeah. Good question.
My theory is that, it's a really hard thing to learn, and it's something that you really have to dedicate yourself to learn. And kind of go through I guess the refiner's fire to get to a point to where it is profitable. And I think most people give up after losing a couple $100 or whatever, and they become a part of that statistic. But I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure where the statistic comes from. I do have the belief that that's probably a lot of it is that they're probably looking at brokerages that are actually executing the trades on the markets for these people. And so you could take, somebody who literally puts $100 in an account and loses it and never trades again, and consider them having lost at day trading. It would be interesting to see somebody who was I'd love to see the statistic of somebody who was consistent and stuck to a system and followed their risk versus reward strategies for a year and see what the statistics would be on that, how many of them would be profitable. But I think if you get good money management strategies, you can have way more success in trading than the statistics would suggest you can. And I think it really comes back to, there's two more pieces to that, and I guess this is really just one of those pieces, but it goes back to what my dad said, and he needs better education and better tools. And better education, the majority of that better education is money management. Learning how to make sure that you leverage your account properly, that just as much as when you experience a loser, that it is a slow loss, right? That allows you to adjust the dials and try again versus like a major loss, right? And a lot of people come into trading as well with the mentality of I want to make it big. So they come in with like a gambler's mentality of like, I want this big, huge win. Well, guess what's the opposite of a big, huge win? A big, huge loss. And so if you can let yourself win slow and be consistent and persistent over a year and really learn the skill, then you can have incredible success. And the flip side of that is if I lose slow, if I win slow, guess what? I'm going to lose slow, which will allow me to adjust and correct the mistake to come back to the winning side.
Right.
So I think one of the biggest mistakes a trader makes is jumping into it with the belief that they're going to have this grandiose win that's just going to make them rich overnight. And we even say it in our disclosure on all of our webinars and everything. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme, right? This is not what this is about. This is not meant to get you rich quick. This is a set of skills that you're going to develop over time that it's like we said, it's going to take time and it's going to take effort and it's going to challenge you, but it can be worth it. So that's what I'd say about it.
Okay. Well, that was great. Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That was good.